Welcome to Inbox Roundup number 22, where I answer questions from you. Today we're going to talk about, will the M7 replace the M4 Armywide? Could NATO and the US return to conscription? Would South Korea fight China in the Pacific? Why have we seen no Kornet missiles in Gaza, at least not recently? Do Russians have names for American planes? You know, like we call Russian planes the Frogfoot or the Foxbat. How long to replace a tank crew? And why are aid airdrops rare? Let's get started. Spencer asks, do you think the U.S. Army will follow through with adopting the XM7 and replacing the M4? Do you think other branches will follow suit, or will this end up getting dropped like other things that were supposed to replace the M4, M16? The XM7 and the XM250 are the Army's new rifle and the Army's new squad automatic weapon, respectively. They are designed to replace the old M4 rifle and the M249 squad automatic weapon in close combat units. And by the way, that specific rifle variant used to be called the XM5, but they ran into some trademark issues with Colt, so now it's the XM7. So if you ever see M5 referenced in older articles, that's why. This particular weapon uses a 6.8mm round in both the rifle and the machine gun with the expressed intention of defeating body armor and light cover. Supposedly, this can go through cinder blocks and hit targets on the other side with power. Now, the Army has already started fielding some of these new weapons with select units in the 101st Airborne and the Army Rangers for acceptance testing. Once it gets accepted, it'll start to roll out, and the X for experimental and XM7 will be dropped for just M7. Now, the idea is that only infantrymen will get these particular rifles. Everybody else will have the old M4 and the SAW, and there is precedent for this. Back during World War II, we had the Thompson, the M1 carbine, and the M1 rifle. And some of them were all in the same unit, and none of the ammunition was compatible. But we figured that out. So it does seem kind of weird that we're going to have two different kinds of ammunition for two different kinds of platforms, but we did it before, and we won World War II on those weapons. Do I think the other branches will follow suit? Maybe the Marine Corps. The Marines have been following the program, and they're always interested in anything that makes them more efficient and effective killers. As for other branches, maybe on a limited basis. I could see maybe the Air Force's Tactical Response Force getting these rifles. The TRF guys are basically a SWAT team for nuclear weapons, so if you try to break into a nuclear missile silo, the TRF guys will ruin your day. But for the most part, the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, they're not doing close combat, so they would probably stick with the M4 and the 5.56 round. Hey, we're not walking around with Vietnam-era M16A1s anymore. You shouldn't be walking around with Vietnam-era hairy balls, and that's why I partnered with Manscaped. Manscaped sent me the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Trimmer, which is both cordless and waterproof. The trimmer features dual skin-safe blade heads, now accompanied by an updated trimmer blade and interchangeable foil blade for enhanced performance. It even has an LED light so you can better navigate actions on the objective. And with up to 60 minutes of runtime, it even works on people who aren't Irish. Now, Manscaped isn't just giving you a good trimmer. They've also partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to help save balls. So visit manscaped.com/TCS to learn how to check yourself for early signs of cancer, which you should do whenever you use your Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Trimmer. As always, you can use my promo code McBeth for 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Join the Manscaped movement and don't forget to take care of your pair. Next, Dylan asks, although obviously the effectiveness of conscript depends on the country, do you think Western NATO countries that use conscripts like Israel, Finland, Austria, etc., that conscription is a net positive for them, or would they fare better off with an all-volunteer force? Boy, that's a good question. I think it depends on the country and just kind of the particular situation that country is in. Some countries like Israel conscript almost everyone, males and females, although there are certain exceptions, mainly because they're surrounded by adversaries. They just need to be able to reach into a pool of people that know how to use a weapon at a moment's notice. Other countries conscript on a percentage basis, like Sweden. In that case, it's only about 5% of graduating students are conscripted every year. And countries like the US, we have a different system where you register for the draft. We call it selective service in case it's ever needed, but it's unlikely ever to be used and nobody is actually drafted. So I think on the whole, Universal conscription is usually a bad idea unless you face an existential threat like Israel. The problem is that if you conscript everybody, there won't be enough work for them to do. And that's actually a major problem in Israel. There's a lot of people who join the IDF and go, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. I'm in charge of stapling, right? I'm in charge of shredding documents. You're taking a year or two out of people's lives when they could be contributing to the economy. And incidentally, this is actually one of the reasons North Korea has conscription. Many of their soldiers are a free form of farm labor. So you're not really keeping soldiers out of the labor pool in North Korea. They are the labor pool. A percentage-based system might be a little bit better, but then you might be getting candidates who are really annoyed that they have to serve and put their lives on hold while their friends don't have to. Their friends can just start working or going to school. And the U.S. Selective Service system has its own problems, mainly that you're starting from zero. So if you ever need a really big army for a war, you don't have a pool of candidates you can dip into other than our IRR, our Individual Ready Reserve. So you're always at least 13 weeks out from getting the bodies you need, and more if you're trying to put conscripts in technical jobs. So if we activated Selective Service tomorrow, it would be at least 13 weeks. It would take a couple of weeks to spin up the system, but it takes at least 13 weeks to construct an infantryman from zero. Now, I can give you an additional option that isn't conscription, and that would be to create shooting clubs. Civil defense clubs have started to become popular in Taiwan, and they're basically airsoft clubs with some military trainers. So it might not be a bad idea for Europe to create and subsidize shooting clubs that are perhaps supervised by the police and military. And if you want, you can go there and learn how to shoot a real rifle under supervised conditions. Maybe you have some airsoft exercises and tactical training. And if war ever comes, at least you have some training and you can act as some kind of reserve militia. But I think for the most part, an all-volunteer force is best for Western countries, especially since you have to balance defense with pushing workers out into the economy. Next, James asks, what are the odds of South Korea getting dragged into a LSCO, or large-scale combat operations fight in the South China Sea? What would be North Korea's role? You know, that is a question for officers, so I asked my old boss, Major Adam Kraft, to answer it, and he said,
South Korea already assists the allies in deterring China and North Korea, the DPRK, and launching operations into several regions, including the Taiwan Straits. Current treaties and multinational military cooperative agreements include South Korea facilities and units in any Indo-Pacific scenario where Chinese aggression must be deterred and countered. It is highly likely North Korean forces will be utilized by the Chinese regime under Xi to both shape the wider strategic fight and to culminate on objectives designed by the Chinese People's Liberation Army to drill large holes in the Allies' any sensor, any decider, any sheeter plans. Japan's current attempts of talks with the DPRK should be seen through an Allied lens, as Japan simultaneously announced increased participation in naval cooperation to enforce international maritime laws pertains to nefarious Chinese air and naval activities in international waters. This was announced on the 5th of April by the Pentagon. These talks and operations are supported by South Korea's government. The South Korean military is primarily focused on the threat from the north, from the DPRK, but also deploys significant forces abroad for multinational missions, including peacekeeping and other security operations. It also participates in bilateral multinational exercises monthly within the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility, Europe, Africa, and even within the United States. South Korea's primary defense partner is the U.S., period, full stop. The 1953 U.S.-South Korea Mutual Defense Treaty is a cornerstone of South Korea's security. This unique treaty committed the United States to provide assistance in the event of an attack, particularly from North Korea, the DPRK. In addition, the treaty gives the United States permission to station land, air, and sea forces in and about the territory of South Korea as determined by mutual agreement. According to 3 U.S. government public sources, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA, the United States maintains approximately 28,000 military personnel in the country and conducts near constant bilateral exercises with the South Korean military. Now, it is important to note South Korea has attained what is called a major non-NATO ally status, or MNNA, with the United States, a designation under U.S. law that provides foreign partners with certain major benefits in the area of defense, trade, and security cooperation. It is also important to note the South Korean military has assisted the United States as deployed participants in conflicts in Afghanistan, which saw 5,000 troops deployed there from 2001 to 2014, Iraq, which saw 20,000 Korean troops there from 2003 to 2008, and the largest combat deployment in Vietnam with 325,000 Korean soldiers from 1963 to 1973. South Korea has increasingly become a global defense and security powerhouse outside of Asia, and in 2016, South Korea concluded an agreement with the European Union for participation in the EU Common Security and Defense Policy, the CSDP, both missions and operations. Some of these included the EU Naval Force Somalia, also known as Operation Atlantia, which protects maritime shipping and conducts counter-piracy operations off the coast of East Africa. South Korea has been engaged with NATO through dialogue and security cooperation since 2005 and is currently considered by NATO to be a significant global partner. In 2022, South Korea established its mission to the NATO to further institutionalize its cooperative relationship. It has participated in NATO-led missions exercises, including leading an integrated civilian military construction team in Afghanistan. It has also cooperated with NATO in countering the threat of piracy in the Gulf of Aden by actually providing naval ships as escorts. As recent as the winter of 2023, South Korea defense industry manufacturers have supplied NATO for the purposes of assisting Ukrainian forces in their fight against the Russian invasion. There is speculation South Korea will join the Indo-PACOM-focused trilateral security partnership between Australia, the UK, and the US that is called AUKUS by 2025. They will be doing this alongside Japan and the Philippines to create something akin to an Asian Five Eyes. South Korea is already in this global fight and intends to see its commitments through.
Major Adam Kraft runs Corgi Global, a private investigative intelligence and security consulting firm. You can reach him at corgiglobal.com. Next, Cases asks, is there a reason why we are not seeing that many Kornet missiles or similar variants being used by Hamas? Is it that they don't have that many, or they're saving them for the later stages of the war? So the Kornet is a Russian anti-tank missile. It's probably one of the best anti-tank missiles in the world. Iran and North Korea have made copies. At least Iran has smuggled some of those into Gaza, probably through tunnels through Sinai and Egypt back in the late 2000s. Hezbollah used North Korean Kornets against IDF tanks back in 2006 during the Lebanon War, and they really ripped through those IDF tanks. The IDF had a bad day. The Kornet is one of the reasons why the IDF developed the Trophy Active Protection System, which is designed to shoot down anti-tank guided missiles. Now, Hamas has used Kornets a handful of times in the 2010s, once to hit a Merkava 3, and once they blew up a school bus. And they did it a couple of times during Operation Protective Edge, I think around 15 or so times, although they didn't score any hits, and supposedly all those launchers were destroyed by return fire. So why haven't they been used? I don't know. The golden standard in any kind of intelligence community is who is doing what and why. If you can get to the end why, like that's golden, right? So my guess is that either they don't have any more of those missiles, or they don't have any more operators, because it's been about 6 months, and if you're an anti-tank guided missile operator, your life might be brutal and short in Gaza right now. But I think the real answer is that it's probably because it's too heavy. The whole system weighs about 140 pounds or like 68 kilos. So you're moving from building to building, and you're essentially carrying a toilet or a beer keg. And that's about as heavy and ungainly as a Kornet is. So just imagine lugging a beer keg or a toilet through tunnels, trying to squeeze through holes and openings, get this thing up into a building, set it up, fire, break it all down again, and go. So I think it's probably because it's just too heavy to be used during the kind of asymmetric war we're seeing now. Next, Topher asks, NATO has alternate names for Russian aircraft, Frogfoot, Blackjack, etc., which is not what the Russians call those aircraft. Do the Russians have their own names for NATO aircraft, or are they okay with Lightning II or Tomcat, etc.? Do Russians have names for American planes? Well, I reached out to a pilot in the California Air National Guard who works quite frequently with the Ukrainian Air Force. He spoke to a few Ukrainian pilots who flew in the Soviet era, and he said that these old pilots just call them by their model numbers. So they don't have special names. They just call them F-16, F-15, F-35. Next, Mike asks, I have to wonder, what do you think the current strength and experience is in Russian armor units? How long does it take to replace a tank or IFV crew? So those are actually two separate questions. The first question is, what do you think is the strength and experience of Russian armor units? And that varies. Now, we're in the third year of this war in Ukraine. So if a guy was drafted back in August of 2022, 6 months into the war, and he has survived this long to what is now April of 2024, he's probably pretty experienced, at least at staying alive. So you probably have mixed units where you have new people come in and are shown how to do things by veterans, and you either get up to speed really quick or you get killed. Now, the problem is that sometimes you have all the experience in the world and it's just not your day. And anybody who drove Route Irish can tell you that a roadside bomb doesn't care how much experience you have. It just blows up in your Vic and it kills you along with the inexperienced guys. So the answer to that is it's probably pretty mixed, but there are probably some pretty hardcore guys in the Russian army who have been fighting for 2 years. Now, on the flip side, they're fighting Ukrainians who've been farming XP for the 2 years straight. So their adversary is experienced as well. Now, the second question is, how long does it take for someone to replace a tank crew? Again, this depends. I could probably take an American M1 Abrams tank crew and plop them down in a Leopard 2, and after about a week block of instruction, they would understand the basics. Probably need another 3 weeks of training to understand all the systems completely. But they would already know the tactics. They would already know how to do vehicle recovery. Their biggest problem might be understanding the particular peculiarities of maintenance for these different platforms. That would take longer to do. But I could probably give an experienced crew a new vehicle and they could be running it in about 6 weeks. If I took a totally green crew, that's a lot different. It takes the U.S. Army about 15 weeks to make a new tank crewman. Basic training, advanced training. But once they graduate from that training, they maybe know 20% of what they're supposed to know. They learn the other 80% of their units. And it probably takes about 3 to 6 months for a crew to really gel. So I would say for someone totally green, and we're not just counting basic training, with just the bare minimum standard, maybe 4 weeks. But they're going to be making a lot of mistakes. And if they compose entire units out of these trainees and send entire units into battle without veterans to guide them, it'll be a catastrophe. They won't know maintenance. They won't know how to do recovery because vehicles get stuck. But 4 weeks would probably be the absolute minimum. Finally, Gabriel asks, why are aid airdrops so rare? Wouldn't the benefits outweigh the risks? So I assume you're talking about aid to Gaza. So in a lot of ways, the benefits probably do outweigh the risks. I mean, I don't want to see civilians starve to death because the IDF doesn't know how to sustain and they don't have the guts to arrest these screaming idiots who are blocking aid convoys. But I think the real reason why you don't see aid drops more often is just availability of aircraft. According to the 2023 World Air Force's book, Jordan has 7 C-130 transports. Egypt has 21, France has 16. The U.S. has 333, and that's just the Air Force. Other branches actually have more transports. Now, that being said, at any given time, the readiness rate for the U.S. Air Force, and this varies on planes, but on average it's 71%. So that means that if you have 10 aircraft on your tarmac, only 7 of them are ready. The other 3 are being maintained in some sort of maintenance status. They're being worked on. They're back at depot for refit or whatever. So if you took that 333 number, that would mean 96 aircraft are down for maintenance. That's 29% would be 96. And these aircraft that aren't being maintained, they need to fly training missions, or they need them for other cargo missions or real-world missions because you're doing other stuff. There is never enough transports. So if you look at a country like Jordan, which has been doing an incredible job doing these airdrops, and you apply the same math, Jordan having 7 of these C-130s, that means 2 of Jordan's aircraft will always be down for maintenance. Always. And now Jordan only has 5 available. And meanwhile, those 5 aircraft, in addition to doing cargo missions in Gaza, they have to do training for the Jordanian Air Force. They might have to move cargo from one place to the other in Jordan. There's a lot of other things those planes have to be doing. And now you only have 5 of them that are absolutely ready. So it's not like there's just transports and pilots just sitting and waiting around for someone to give them a mission. This stuff needs to be planned. It needs to be worked around the current maintenance schedule, and it needs to be worked around the availability schedule and the training schedule. And that's it. So, hey, if you want to support the channel, go get one of my Live, Laugh, Launch for Trident missile shirts from Bunker Branding. It all goes to support this content. And thank you guys so much for watching.
Oh man, I'm so bored! Christ on crutches with a permanent profile. That's because you have the wrong toys! You need a Ryan McBeth in action figure from the Knife Hand Company. That's right, Ryan McBeth in action figures go everywhere! Put them on your desk, your Crocs, your keychain! You can even ask Ryan advice.
Ryan, why does Daddy ignore me when I'm over his house for the weekend?
Because your new mommy is way hotter than your old mommy! Trading cards! You get a free trading card in every box! Now that's Ryan-rific! So come on down to the Knife Hand Company and get your in-action figure today! Alcoholism, cigarettes, and non-service connected hearing loss sold separately.